Hey guys, this is Mr. Murky with Mr. M's Musical History Review. Yay! Now calm down now. Okay, this is going to be a little video series that I'm going to do just to kind of keep you guys interested in all things musical. And it's hard for us to love music and not talk about the music of the past. So I'm going to start with our first subject. Today is one of the most important and prolific classical composers of all time. It was a guy named Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, Bach was born in 1685 in Eisenach, Germany. He died in 1750 in Leipzig, Germany. A couple things about his personal life. He married a woman named Maria Barbara Bach, who was his second cousin. So, yeah. He had 7 kids with her, but she died in 1720, and then he remarried to a lady named Anna Vulcan, who was a brilliant singer and instrumentalist herself, and they had 13 kids together. So that makes his total 20 kids. So good job, Johann. Well done. He taught all of his kids how to play musical instruments. He liked to boast that he had like a band in his own living room with all of his kids playing instruments, similar to like the Partridge Family or the Jackson 5 or the Osmonds. I guess you're gonna have to just Google all those because you probably don't know what any of those are. Bach was a brilliant musician. He was like the best organist of his day, probably one of the best harpsichord players of his day. He also played violin. His father was a violinist, and he was also a singer, like when he was young. He worked primarily for churches and for royal courts, where most of his music was written. And because of that, that's probably part of the reason why a lot of his music was written down. So what about his music? Well, Bach was very prolific. He wrote over 1,100 pieces of music, chamber music, organ, keyboard music, vocal music, choral music. His music is characterized by a couple significant factors. But before we get that, we need to talk for a second about the Baroque period. The Baroque musical period, also referring to the Baroque period with art and architecture, was between 1600 and about 1750. The Baroque period was like a time of kings and castles and pomp and ceremony and growing towns and a growing trade, and where education really started to become popular in Europe. Baroque music is characterized by its instrumentation. There was a lot of harpsichords, stringed instruments, some wind instruments, but usually very small ensembles, usually no more than 20. Musical characteristics of the Baroque period would be there were a lot of rules. Like if a composer broke those rules, then the people of the time would think that it sounded funny or that it didn't sound right, and then that it wouldn't become popular. Bach liked to gently break the rules, however. Modulation was something that Bach used, actually changing keys in a piece of music to a different scale and a different key. That was almost unheard of then. Something that's characterized by Baroque music and also Bach's music is something called ornamentation. Now, for instance, if you could use 3 notes to get from one note to the next, Bach would use like 17. For instance, okay, so here's a little bit of an example. So if we're gonna get from G to C, or C, so if we went like, okay, Bach would do it probably this way. So instead of just, he would go like. So that's what ornamentation is. Another thing that Bach used a lot of is this concept of counterpoint, where there's two melodies sort of working together and intermingling together. That's huge in Bach's music. If you listen to any Bach invention, you're kind of amazed at how the two hands, especially for keyboard, are working together and sort of against each other at the same time. I'm not going to play this well, but here's a little bit of an example. So you can see the two hands are sort of working together. The right hand is playing, and the left hand is going. So kind of repeating what the right hand did. Anyway, that's called counterpoint. It's really hard to play unless you have really good independence between both hands. Another thing that Bach did was he kind of broke the mold by writing solo pieces for instruments that weren't normally used as solo instruments. Most of the time they would have a violin concerto or something and feature the violin player. Well, Bach really featured what were called continuo instruments, which were instruments that typically just created the foundation, like the chordal structure, like harpsichord and organ. But he wrote solo pieces just for those instruments, which was kind of really out of the norm. All in all, as I said, Bach is one of the three Bs. Three probably most significant composers throughout early Western music. The other two being Beethoven and Brahms. And probably those two are going to be my next two guys that I hit on. Stay tuned. I'm going to keep doing little videos like this. Hope you guys are well. Don't let anybody else play your instruments right now. And if you do, dip them in bleach. Not the instruments, the mouthpieces, whatever. Stay safe, stay healthy. I miss you guys. Take care.